sometimes at the bottom left of the screen that people might not be able to just see the text.
Okay. Now, will they be receiving a copy of the text as well?
What, in terms of a paper copy?
Yes. Or will you put it online at the conference site?
People like it to go online afterwards. They certainly haven't got a copy in front of them at the moment.
Okay. Well, putting it online is fine.
Yeah, I think that's the plan.
Okay. That sounds fine.
You'll be able to see it.
Okay, that's fine. Hi, Paramita. How are you? It's my pleasure. Hi. Good, I'm glad. Okay, well, they're in the right order. So what he should do is just listen kind of to what I'm saying, because I won't be able to see the slides, so he'll have to figure that out. But I think he will. I think the presentation will be clear enough that he'll be able to know.
Thank you. I think you're ready to start in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Just 2 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not sure, is the microphone on? Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this final session of the day. I'm going to have Professor Joyce Vantassel Baska joining us today. So let me just say a few words about Joyce, for those of you that don't already know lots about her. Professor Joyce Vantassel Baska is the Smith Professor Emerita of Education and founding director of the Centre for Gifted Education at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, where she developed a graduate programme and a research and development centre in gifted education. She also initiated and directed the Centre for Talent Development at the Northwestern University. She has worked as a consultant on gifted education in 50 states and for key national groups, including the US Department of Education, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and the American Association of School Administrators. She is past president of the Association for the Gifted Council for Exceptional Children and the National Association for Gifted Children at NAGSI. During her tenure as NAGSI president, she oversaw the adoption of the new teacher standards for gifted education and organised and chaired the National Leadership Conference on Promising and Low-Income Learners, including a major emphasis on early childhood interventions. Professor Vantassel Baska has published widely, including 28 books and over 550 refereed journal articles, book chapters and scholarly reports. Recent books include Content-Based Curriculum for Gifted Learners with Catherine Little, Patterns and Profiles of Low-Income Learners, Social and Emotional Curriculum for Gifted and Talented Students, and she also served as the editor of Gifted and Talented International, a research journal of the World Council on Gifted and Talented from 1998 to 2005. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Joyce to lead us through this presentation, and I'm going to be the technical wizard today in terms of making the slides and things happen, so hopefully it will all match up. So, over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much. Well, it's my pleasure to be with you this evening, even if only by video conference. It's a very icy, rainy day here in Washington, D.C. And of course, as you know, it is very early in the morning. So hopefully my message will be coherent and the ideas will cause you to want to ask questions when we reach that particular stage of the presentation. It's my pleasure to focus on what I think is one of the most important issues in gifted and talented education, and that is, what do we need to be doing with programs and services for these students? And what do we need to be doing at various levels of the enterprise? What do we need to do in classrooms? What do we need to do in schools? What do we need to do within large regional areas? And indeed, what do we need to do within countries? What is the societal obligation to this particular population? So my remarks, while limited to about 30 minutes, are meant to convey to you the importance of those levels of service, as well as the nature of what we really know and can do effectively on behalf of these students. The first slide has a quote from Csikszentmihalyi and Wolf from the year 2000, and it says that the future will require individuals who are able to formulate new problems, come up with new solutions, and adapt readily to the new ideas of others. I think it is extremely important as we think about building programs and services that we build in a major emphasis on problem finding and problem solving. And so I thought, in terms of organizing my presentation today, I also would use a problem-based learning orientation. And for those of you who haven't worked with PBL scenarios in terms of your own work in classrooms with students, either at elementary, secondary, or tertiary levels, some of the key features that are important to keep in mind are that you have students working as stakeholders in a collaborative small team model. They're working on a real-world problem, which means that it's always going to be ambiguous and ill-defined. They learn very quickly that there are always social and political agendas at work because we're dealing with real human beings in social settings. They also begin to learn that in the real world, problems don't get solved, they merely get resolved because of a deadline coming up. Just as we see in the real world all around us today, that is the nature of our approaches to worldwide problems as well. And then finally, for those of you who are classroom teachers, a metacognitive planning tool like a need-to-know board. What do you know? What do you need to know? How are you going to find out? Becomes a useful tool throughout the entire problem-based learning scenario. So I'm going to emulate as much as I can some of these key features related to problem-based learning, beginning with the very first thing, which has to do with what do we know about curriculum, instruction, and assessment for the gifted. I'm focusing here on the research base that we have in terms of working with gifted learners in the classroom. We have other research bases that speak to general provisions for the gifted, and many of my colleagues, I'm sure, have already mentioned those. So I want to focus on that research that's been done that in fact looks at what works more effectively for gifted learners than what works with typical learners, because all of these studies have been quasi-experimental in orientation, which means that we have had control groups receiving a gifted intervention, but not of the type that, in fact, we think meets the standards of differentiation that is necessary. So what kind of research is available that we can think about in this way? Certainly there has been research that's come out of our center over the past 20 years that's focused on what we know about teaching language arts, about teaching science, and about teaching social studies to gifted and talented students. We know not only that using a strong content base matters, we also know that the use of higher level strategies, whether it's higher level thinking or problem solving or conducting research, is an important part of that delivery system. At the University of Connecticut, there has been a series of studies related to math interventions for the gifted, again with a major emphasis on problem finding and problem solving as the orientation, and again, doing it with non-algorithmic problems. There's also been research that we've conducted at our center on existing curriculum models. We have about 14 in the field that have been around for about 20 years. Only 4 of those models actually have research evidence behind them. And the models with research evidence behind them, again, haven't fully tested the model. What they have tested are components of the model. So whether it's the ICM model that I've developed, the integrated curriculum model, whether it's the SEM model, whether it is the componential model. What has been assessed are key components related to those models. But the ones that have research evidence, again, hold us in pretty good stead in terms of what matters for working with the gifted. Looking at what works within those models, again, we have evidence that shows the importance of that focus on higher level thinking and higher level doing in classrooms. And finally, I would argue that we also have an evolving research base on the use of problem-based learning as a very strong tool for making a difference in enhancing the learning of gifted and talented students. Several studies to date have continued to show not only do students learn the content base when they employ problem-based learning, but they also master important tools of problem finding and problem solving and important tools for working in the real world. We've also learned quite a bit about using alternative assessments for learning. And the assessment tools that have been most useful in terms of working with the gifted have tended to be product-based assessments where students have constructed either individually or in small groups a particular product or project and have used these higher level skills in order to be able to do it. So product-based assessment has given us good insight into what students are capable of doing, especially when those products are judged by experts in the content field itself. So science competitions, for example, that are judged by scientists and others who know science, writing competitions that are judged by writers. These are all examples of products that are real world in orientation and that, again, not only are done for real world audiences, but are judged by experts who know the nature of that subject area. In addition to product assessment, we also have done a lot of work with performance-based assessment. Assessment that requires students to deal with novel problems that they've not encountered before, but within the subject area that they've been studying, and how they go about handling those problems, solving them, and the thinking processes that they tend to employ. All good alternative assessment performance-based approaches that are used in gifted programs today tend to be off-level in orientation. They tend to call for creative, more open-ended responses, and they tend to focus on higher level thinking and problem solving as the main orientation of the assessment approach. In addition to alternative assessments, we also know quite a bit about professional development that works. I won't say that in the United States we pay a lot of attention to this necessarily, but we know a lot about it at this point. We've studied it, and we know, for example, that for professional development to work, there has to be a major emphasis on a target focus of what you want teachers to be able to do. If it's deliver differentiated instruction, then we know that they need at least 5 days of training intensively, followed by opportunities in the classroom to practice, followed by follow-up monitoring in the context of the school, followed up by further training at key intervals throughout a given year. And that typically, if you're taking teachers who have never worked with gifted learners before or who have very limited experience and very little background, it's going to take probably 2 years in order for them to reach a high level of being able to use these differentiation skills. And finally, we have a large and rich research base and